Call the Land Use Committee meeting of Sioux Falls, South Dakota to order on today, April 16th, 2013. Welcome everybody, and those of you at home and watching on Channel 16. Everyone is here, all the counselors. I would entertain a motion to approve the minutes of Tuesday, March 19th, 2013.
So move, Karski.
Second, Anderson.
We have a motion and a second to approve those minutes. All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Today we have one item on the agenda that is printed, the facade easement program review. We have a number of people to speak on that. I believe, Brent, you're going to start? Thank you.
Thank you for having me. Brent O'Neill with the Economic Development Division of Community Development. As you said, we're here to talk about the facade easement program. We came before the council as an informational item in October. At that point, an action was taken to have this committee come back and listen to the program later after we worked with staff on elements of the program. So in the last few months, we've worked with Dave Bixler and Jim David with the council staff, as well as Paul Bangford in the city's attorney's office. And then our department obviously has been involved quite a bit as well. Both Dave and Paul are going to have short little pieces of this presentation as well.
I might interrupt you just
Sure.
right there if I could, because the reason we wanted to have this done is there were some questions by this body and some others that we've heard from around the city about the effectiveness of the program. Maybe it should be tweaked a little bit, changed a little bit. Maybe we could make it more effective with making some changes. And so that's why we asked you to do some studying on it, asked our staff to do that, and to come back with some recommendations for us to look at.
Mm-hmm.
So
Okay.
continue, thank you.
We will. I'm going to give just a real short, abbreviated version of that presentation that was given in October. It is very brief, so please stop me for questions or anything if I omitted anything. Otherwise, all three of us will be available for questions at the end. In a nutshell, our program really has three purposes, supporting economic development, revitalization of the city's core, and historic preservation. It encourages new investment into our core area. It supports commercial development. It supports residential development. And a key aspect of the program is, making sure that buildings are attractive, safe, functional, and so forth. The program is a snapshot of the 11 years or so that the program's been in effect. It began in 2002. Since that time, there have been 29 awarded projects. 27 of them have been funded directly through the CIP program that the council approves annually. That totals about $1.7 million in investment through the CIP. Traditionally, it has been focused on historic preservation in the downtown area. You see through about 2010, well, through today even, that downtown area is where the investments in the facade easement have been made. Beginning in 2010, our department did a semi-evaluation of the program and tried to make a few changes. Among those, we wanted to expand the flexibility of the program. One example is that as we move from an annual application process to an application process that, while it has an annual deadline, allows us to take applications in year-round, so we're not necessarily having to wait a year to consider a project that may have missed a deadline by a month or even a few days. Another big aspect is we expanded the territory where the program has eligible properties beyond the downtown area to what was the community development revitalization area. It probably increased the total land area of eligible projects by 3 or 4-fold. It includes areas like Pettigrew, Whittier, some of the North End, All Saints, etc. One other thing I want to add about the program as a whole is, in a few of these cases, the historic buildings have also participated with the State Historic Preservation Office, and that has been kind of a nice partnership to really support some of these development projects. Dave's going to talk a little bit about that in his report, but to just summarize what that program is it allows a tax freeze, a property tax freeze from the time the project started. There's a certain amount of improvements that increase the assessable value of a property. That is kept frozen for 8 years, and then that full value is realized beginning in the 9th year. So it's just kind of a twofold way that some of these projects are able to come to fruition. In my closing part of the presentation, I just want to emphasize again why we feel it works. It is a direct way for the city to invest in the image of its future. Aesthetics are important, preservations are important. It means things to the community, it means things to outsiders. Those types of things really do have value, even though it's sometimes hard to measure. It's a direct way of supporting economic development. It does, create investment in our downtown and our core. It leads to jobs, it leads to growth, it leads to further enhancements of our economic environment. And then lastly, kind of that measurable, that return on investment, there are ways of saying that this program does make sense financially. There are some items that are very quantifiable, and Dave's going to talk about that a little bit, but I mean, you can literally see from just solely a taxation value that investments in this program can actually pay for themselves given enough years. There are also some other things that are more intangible, a little bit harder to mention, but how does it leverage private sector investment? In addition to solely investment in a building, does it catalyze growth in an area? Does it create people to want to invest in an area that's otherwise neglected? I know to use an example, if you talk about blight sometimes has a way of creating a spiral, a downward. One building goes and then the next, and it creates this sort of viral impact. I think in our program, it kind of works the opposite way. It creates that spiral up. Some good investment can lead to other investment and a pride in the community, an investment in certain areas. So with that, I am going to turn it over to Dave for a little bit, and then Paul.
Thank you. Dave Bixler, council staff. Just talking about the facade easement economic results. As Brent had said, there are 27 participants in the program to date. Since its inception, the city has invested $1.7 million, and the award recipients have invested $15.8 million. So that's a ratio of 11% for the city, 89% for the participants that, with their buildings. For all the projects, the overall payback on average is 10 years. Now, if we break out into projects that use a moratorium and non-moratorium, we have a little bit more of a deferral of that payback just due to the fact that those 8 years we're not seeing that tax return. But one of the biggest points I want to drive home on this is that the assessment value prior to the program was about $5.2 million for all these projects, and afterwards it's about 20.3, a 293% increase in assessed value. Our recommendations are that the council staff, the city attorney, and the community development staffs have vetted the program and have gone through to make sure that everything is lined up as we would suspect. We only have one adjustment, and that is at the post-selection process. We would like to have the legal compliance checked by the city attorney's office prior to the award being offered, just to be sure that it is in compliance. And to speak about compliance, I'm going to turn it over to Paul.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and committee members. One of the things that Brent O'Neill and David Bixler asked me to talk about here today was just in terms of where we get the authority in the state law to do this and how far the program can be extended, because there were some questions about whether this program could be extended to non-historic buildings. There is language in South Dakota statutes in Chapter 43 that talks about what easements can be obtained on land. And what gives us the authority there is under Chapter 43, 13-2, subsection 18, talks about that easements can be granted for the right of preserving historically important land areas or structures, which is how this program has been utilized. There is also some guidance in Chapter 119B16 on the acquisition of historical easements that talks about these easements that are obtained are to maintain or enhance all or part of the existing state of places of historical, architectural, archaeological, paleontological, or cultural significance. So we really need to keep into those 5 areas. In terms of talking about doing the facade easement for more modern buildings, if it was extended to that, it would need to fall into one of these 5 categories. And so that's what gives us the authority to do it. The state enabling legislation in Chapter 119B, along with the ability to determine these easements for historically important land areas or structures. Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Yes, questions then?
Paul, before you,
Counselor Anderson?
wanted to catch Paul before he
Yeah.
sat down.
Yes.
Paul, with that being stated, it didn't say anything about it having to be a commercial building, did it?
No, there's nothing in here that requires a commercial building if it meets those 5 other areas.
So it could actually be used on, if somebody had a residential building that would meet that criteria, they could actually apply for that. Is that correct?
As long as it's determined that that's in the public interest. I mean, there is the aspect that has to be in the public interest, but there's nothing here that I see that delineates commercial versus residential as long as it's in the public interest.
Okay, thank you.
Counselor Karski?
Dave Bixler, please. Quick question. On your numbers, the facade easement economic results, the increase in tax revenue, is that on the top line with the 27, is that a 10-year number? What number?
That would be in total of all the projects once they are completed and the assessment has taken place, the new assessment has taken place, and the new mill levy calculation has taken place. That would be the total.
Per year or?
Per year.
So there's a $300,000 increase in tax revenue per year based on the investments combined between the facade and the property owners.
Yes, and one thing that it does not take into account is the annual CPI increases on property tax. So it's more of a conservative approach.
Okay. And then on the bottom, again, the increase in tax revenue, that's per year. But when you go the years to break even, you say 7 years to break even. If I take 7 years times the 216,000, it's not 1.2 million.
You can't take it the way, this is just a summary. Mm-hmm. There's a lot more to it as far as the terms of the payoff. And so this is just to boil it down to an on average. So an on average, okay, like I said, it's 10 years to pay off. That's on average. Now there are going to be differences, higher and lower, but for the most part, it's going to be 10 years. And then when you're looking at the lower slide where the 17 years to break even, that's just taking into account the 8-year moratorium freeze.
Okay. Question for Brent, if I may. Take me into the thought process on the whole facade easement. I mean, is the reason for the impetus for awarding a facade easement, is it to kickstart a project? Is it to award them for improving their building? What is the real background here?
Yeah, I think it can be several aspects, but probably the 2 big drivers would be, one, to assist a project that might not otherwise happen, or at least enhance a project that might have happened on a smaller scale. And then really that second part is those community investments. That Phillips Avenue has several easements on it, and Phillips Avenue, as you guys all hear, it gets tons of compliments. Part of that is the investment the city makes in the infrastructure. The Phillips Avenue project in 2009 would be an example. But just that the character of our downtown, maintains something that people desire, that appeals to them. So that I would argue is kind of the second main reason. I think there's a couple smaller ones that vary from project to project.
Counselor Segers?
Yes, I'm just wondering about those two non-CIP projects that you have. Are those the two buildings that received more than one of these grants?
No, they are two buildings up in the Uptown area. And as part of those renovations, one of them would be that building that was commonly referred to as the stoplight building. It's now Larson Square. That was included in the TIF district, and as a condition of the TIF, which goes back several years now, the city required that Lloyd companies and their partners give the city an easement, which is basically, attaching the same covenants to those buildings that we would attach to any other award as a condition of receiving the tax increment financing district.
Oh, okay. So what are the buildings that have received more than one grant?
In essence, no building has received more than one grant. There are two cases I think you're referring to where there's been a perception maybe that two buildings are actually one building. For example, Interstate Office Products has two distinct buildings, and as part of their facade, we actually signed two separate facade easement agreements. Again, it goes back to the legality of it a little bit, that the easement runs with the land, so it's got to be tied to the legal description. So in Interstate Office Products, there was a total award of $105,000. I don't remember the split, but basically some was, put on one building and some was put on the other, but it was two distinct buildings.
Oh, okay. One of the major criticisms I've heard about this program is just a business welfare program. How do you respond to that?
I think it is, a classic example of a very small investment by the city, leading to a very good return on that investment, as well as stimulating, private development above and beyond that several fold. I think if you go back 10 or 15 or 20 years of the 5 or 6 big actions that the city and the city council have taken, in particular to assist downtown, this has really been one of those top 5 actions to really get downtown to the success it is today.
Yeah, but I guess people would say, yeah, we might have had some benefits for downtown as a result of this program, but it's still ultimately, in essence, a welfare program for business.
I would disagree. I can see your argument, but I would disagree.
Also, just one other
You have
thing.
another one? Okay.
These numbers here about the city has awarded $1,734,944, and then the recipients have invested $15,829,232. So, even though the amount the city has invested is rather small in comparison to total private investment, I guess sometimes the impression is being given that without the $1,734,000, we wouldn't have had the $15 million, and that's unlikely.
Yeah, if I can respond to that, I would say that, it might, there's going to be some subjectivity, like you say, in making that argument. I would say, though, that you might have gotten a portion of that $15 million, but that you wouldn't have gotten the full $15.8 million. You might have, there's going to have been a couple projects that probably would have not happened at all. There's been others that, it might have actually saved a building. There's others where, someone might have done just enough to keep the building from falling down, so that would have been a small investment, but by having the facade easement program, it actually, kick-started additional investment to stabilize a building, to renovate the 3rd and 4th floors into offices or apartments. So I think it really, to answer your question, I think to get to that full $15.89 million would have not been achievable without that investment in the facade easement program.
Once again, there's going to be maybe some minor projects that are going to take off as a result of this, but
Sure.
really, the overwhelming is private investment, and this is just another way to maybe make their buildings look a little better than they would normally be.
Oh, I think that's true. I think we also benefit from that as well.
Counselor Karski?
Brent, put the picture back up if you don't mind of the building. What a great example of before and after. Tell us what building this is, where it is, who's in it, and maybe what we put into this. What was our, do we know? Do you know that information?
Yeah, I do have a little summary here of all the projects. I believe I sent.
Just this one. I mean, it's just a great example of maybe a kickstart or the incentive to, because a business could remodel the inside of a building and leave the outside.
Right, as long as it's sealed from elements, they could, and not do anything like this. This is, we refer to it as a standard oil company garage. That's the historic name that's been given to it. It is now the offices of AdWorks, a marketing firm in Sioux Falls. It was a 2006 project. This is a $24,000 investment by the city. We're showing that they took out $230,000 worth of building permits in addition to the facade work. It had about I'll just rough it out, about $150,000 increase in assessed valuation. This is also one that participated in that state moratorium, so that received that reduced taxation for a period of years also. Just for location purposes, it's right across Main Avenue from the Coliseum. It's kind of on that northern edge of our downtown.
Thank you.
Any other questions? I have a couple. I'd like to make a comment on this building. It probably would have been cheaper for them, rather than sandblasting that brick and bringing it back to what it looked like originally. Probably would have been cheaper for them to put siding on that or something along those lines, get up to what it looked like in a modern building more than to restore it to a historic building, the view rather. And that's what this is meant to do.
Right.
And for me, that's a cheap price for us to pay to have it brought back to those kind of standards. So I do have one question for Paul. And one recommendation that did come out of this is as it says, post-selection process, confirm legal compliance with city attorney. How are we planning on doing that, Paul? Because I think that if one thing does come out of this thing, that's probably a real important one, that we assure ourselves that compliance has been done, that we haven't been, we're going to give these people $25,000 or $100,000 to do this, and they don't, do it inexpensively, or they do it halfway, that kind of thing. And how are we planning on doing that?
Sure. And working with Brent on one of the most recent ones, I mean, community development is doing a great job, bringing it to us right from the beginning to help with the drafting of the papers and looking at the legalities from the beginning and throughout, and making sure before the final agreements are signed that they've all been reviewed by our office and taken care of. And I think that community development and the attorney's office both have made a commitment to make sure that happens and that's done, and that these are properly reviewed at the time.
So it's going to go through development office and Brent's office, not yours.
Brent's office, but in coordination with our office, yes, in terms
Okay.
of reviewing the documents and making sure that they follow the legalities.
And we
correct.
will go through every contract with them that way.
Yes.
Okay. Are there any other questions from the committee? I don't know that we need to handle this, needs to go any farther or anything like that, unless one of the committee members thinks that we need to do something.
If I could.
Counselor?
Interesting presentation, and it's good to see where the numbers are, what our investment is giving. And Councilor Anderson and I kind of had that discussion on the side that we know about the program, but what is it giving back to us, the community? What's the return, the tax incentive, et cetera? I'm comfortable with the way it is.
Would there be some value to having this brought to the informational so that the rest of the council members could see, especially this part of it where they see the value that we're getting from it?
I would have no problem letting leadership make that decision
Okay.
if they would like to continue this. I'm one who has been sort of critical of this project, but I will say too also that it has enhanced some areas of our city, and this is a great example, Fifth and Main, due to the fact that we had some grants, and because of this program, next door is the Library of Visual Materials
Right.
Museum, and across the street is the Coliseum or the Multicultural Center. All three of these buildings have taken facade money and have enhanced that intersection, that neighborhood up there, to where we have even more development happening. So I think that we've looked at this, we've done the show me to make sure that it is doing what community development has said it's doing, and I think that they have showed us.
Okay. I couldn't agree with you more. This building looks just fantastic right now, and AdWorks, I'm sure, will continue with it that way because they own it. And it's their building and it's their home. So, yes,
Yeah, I think you won't be surprised when I say that, yeah, this has done a lot of enhancement for the bottom line of businesses. In effect, almost getting free money here that the rest of the citizens of the community cannot get at all. So the building that we took a look at, $24,000. Well, I'll have to admit $24,000 is not very much, but I'm not sure that they wouldn't have gone ahead and done it anyway without the $24,000.
I won't disagree with you there, Councilman Staggers, but I also look at the whole project and how it is expanded.
Yeah.
And even with the, and outside of the downtown area. And that's what I wanted to see. I wanted to see it look at other historical areas if we're going to utilize this. We have many other programs within the city that would be, I would consider maybe just like what you're saying, give away dollars, these TIF districts that we do, but we do them for a reason. And that reason is that economic development to help restore those older neighborhoods or those older areas of the city. And I feel that this project is one that is doing that now.
okay, with that in mind, I will contact leadership, ask them to view this meeting, a short meeting, and the presentation, and if they would like to have it come before informational, they may contact you and ask you to do that, if that's okay with you, and because I do think it was very enlightening. Is there any other information to come before the Land Use Committee under open discussion? Hearing none, I will adjourn this meeting.